The crystal archives of Nova Centauri weren't supposed to be active. That was Dr. Alexandra Morgan's first thought as she watched pale blue light seep through the translucent walls of the ancient chamber. The archaeological site had been dead for millennia, its secrets locked away in crystalline matrices that had resisted every attempt at access. Until now. "Dr. Morgan, you need to see this." Jake Martinez's voice crackled through her comm unit, excitement breaking through the professional detachment he usually maintained. "The northern chamber. It's just come quick." Alex adjusted her EnviroSuite settings, grateful for the extra oxygen, as she jogged through the winding corridors. The ruins had been their home for the past 8 months, but she'd never seen them like this. Pale light pulsed through the walls in rhythmic waves, like a heartbeat awakening after eons of slumber. She found Jake standing in the doorway of what they dubbed the bestiary, a vast chamber whose walls were etched with what appeared to be Earth's prehistoric creatures. His helmet was off, despite protocols, and his face was bathed in the ethereal blue glow. "Jake, helmet on. Now," she snapped. But the words died in her throat as she saw what had captured his attention. The etchings had come alive. 3-dimensional holograms filled the chamber, each one a perfect recreation of Earth's lost megafauna. A woolly mammoth towered above them, its tusks gleaming with an inner light that seemed too precise to be natural. Beside it, a giant ground sloth reared up on its hind legs, its movements fluid and eerily deliberate. "It's some kind of database," Jake whispered, his hand reaching out to touch the mammoth's trunk. The hologram rippled, and suddenly the creature's skin became transparent, revealing layer after layer of internal structure. But what Alex saw made her blood run cold. "That's not possible," she breathed, moving closer. Within the mammoth's DNA structure, clearly visible in the holographic display, were patterns she'd never seen in any natural organism. Perfect geometric sequences repeated with machine-like precision. "This is engineered. All of it." Her hands flew over the crystal control surface, years of research finally paying off as she recognized patterns in the alien interface. The display shifted, showing more creatures. Saber-toothed cats, Irish elk, even the massive megatherium. Each one contained the same impossible sequences. "Alex," Jake's voice was barely audible. "Look at the timeline." The data showed these creatures vanishing from Earth's fossil record, but not in the random pattern of natural extinction. The disappearances were coordinated, precise, like a planned withdrawal. A new hologram appeared, this one showing early humans. They were hunting the megafauna. But something was wrong. The giant creatures were moving in patterns, herding humans away from certain areas, protecting them from something. They were guardians, Alex said, the truth finally clicking into place. Someone put them there to protect us, to guide our development. The chamber's light pulsed brighter, and new data streams began to flow. Alex's translation software started picking up fragments. Project Earthshield, human variable, unexpected development, council decision required. A final hologram materialized, a map of human colonial space, with a massive wave of something approaching from the galactic core. Something the ancient guardians had been designed to protect against. Jake checked his wrist display. "Alex, the signal. It's broadcasting. To every human colony." She nodded, her mind racing with the implications, because whatever those things were protecting us from, it's coming back. And this time, our guardians aren't here to shield us. The crystal walls pulsed one final time, and a countdown appeared. 28 days until the wave would hit the first human settlement. "Get me a direct line to Earth Command," Alex said, her voice steady despite the weight of what they'd discovered. "And Jake, get your helmet back on. We're going to be here a while." 27 days until impact, and the crystal archives had become a hub of frenzied activity. Dr. Alexandra Morgan hadn't left the bestiary chamber in 36 hours, her eyes fixed on the holographic displays as each new layer of truth unfolded before her. The mammoth DNA sequence is unlike anything we've ever seen, she dictated into her recorder, voice hoarse from lack of sleep. Their fur wasn't just for warmth. Each strand was a microscopic radiation shield. The entire species was a walking defense network. Behind her, 3 different science teams worked in shifts, processing the flood of data from the alien archives. The chamber's blue light had dimmed to a gentle pulse, as if conserving energy for the long hours ahead. Dr. Morgan, Dr. Sarah Wells, their lead geneticist, called from her station. You need to see the ground sloth analysis. Alex moved to the new display, where a giant ground sloth's hologram rotated slowly. Its internal structure was even more surprising than the mammoths. What they'd always assumed was lazy behavior had been something else entirely. They were scanning, Alex breathed, watching the simulation of neural activity in the creature's brain. Every time they stood still, they were running environmental analyses, testing for threats we couldn't even perceive. The data showed something else too. A complex network of organs that didn't match any known biological system. These weren't just animals. They were bioengineered sentinels, created with technology far beyond their current understanding. Jake Martinez entered the chamber, carrying fresh coffee and looking as exhausted as everyone else. Earth Command's latest update just came in. They're evacuating the outer colonies, but there's not enough time or ships to get everyone out before the wave hits. Alex took the coffee, her hand shaking slightly. Show me the saber-tooth data again, she called out. The hologram shifted, displaying the fearsome predator. But instead of hunting patterns, they saw protection protocols. Every recorded interaction with early humans showed the same thing. Strategic positioning to shield human settlements from something in the sky. Look at this, Dr. Wells pointed to a neural pattern. They had some kind of absolute directive in their programming. They could never, under any circumstances, harm a human being. But we hunted them, Jake said, frowning at the display. We hunted them to extinction. No. Alex set down her coffee, moving to the central control interface. Show me final phase statistics. All species. The air filled with numbers, dates, migration patterns. They weren't hunted to extinction. They were withdrawn. Look at the population numbers. They're too clean, too coordinated. This was a planned exit. The chamber's light shifted to a deep purple as new data streams opened. Alex's translation software began processing ancient council records, debates about Earth's future, about humanity's potential. They were divided, she read, her voice growing more excited. Some wanted to maintain the protection protocol, keep the guardians in place, but others saw something in us, something that made them change their plans. The final council recording played, its alien language now translated. The human variable exceeds all projections. They do not merely survive. They challenge. They do not accept protection. They overcome. The greatest gift we can offer is not our shield, but the chance to become their own. LX, Jake's voice was urgent. The wave's radiation signature. It matches what the Guardians were designed to protect against, if they were engineered to shield us. She nodded, already moving to the genetic analysis station. Then maybe their design specs can tell us how to shield ourselves. But we need to work fast. She glanced at the countdown timer, its numbers ever declining. We've got 26 days to learn what the Guardians knew, to understand not just how they protected us, but why they chose to leave. Dr. Wells finished, already beginning the new analysis. The crystal walls pulsed once more, as if in approval of their understanding. Somewhere in this data was the key to humanity's survival. If they could only decipher it in time. 25 days until impact, and Dr. Alexandra Morgan found herself staring at a hologram that challenged everything she thought she knew about human history. The Crystal Archives display showed a group of early humans hunting a woolly mammoth, but something was different about this recording. "Play it again," she commanded, and the scene reset. A dozen humans moved in perfect formation, their spears held at precise angles. The mammoth, the guardian, retreated exactly as they predicted it would. This wasn't just hunting. It was military precision. "They're reading the Guardian's programming," Jake said, breaking the silence that had fallen over the chamber. "Look at their positioning. They know it can't attack them directly." Dr. Wells adjusted the hologram's timeline. "This isn't an isolated incident. There are hundreds of similar recordings spanning different continents, different human groups. They all learned the same thing. The Guardians had rules they couldn't break." Alex watched as the display showed more hunting parties. Each generation of humans grew more sophisticated in their approach. They developed new tools, new strategies, all based on their understanding of the Guardians' behavioral limits. "The aliens never expected this," she murmured, moving through the data streams. "Their council records show complete shock. The Guardians were supposed to be invincible protectors, but humans turned that protection into a weakness." The chamber's light shifted to a deep red as it displayed a new scene. A group of humans had cornered a giant ground sloth. The creature, despite its enormous size and strength, could only retreat. Its programming, the very core of its engineered nature, prevented it from harming those it was designed to protect. "There's something else," Dr. Wells called out, her voice tense with discovery. "The genetic samples we've been studying, the Guardians were adapting, not just retreating, but actually evolving new defensive strategies. Look at these protein structures." The display shifted to show complex molecular chains. Alex felt her heart rate spike as she understood the implications. They were learning. The hunters forced them to develop new protections, new ways to shield without engaging. "But that means the hunting made them stronger," Jake finished, his eyes wide. "And by extension, it made us stronger too." Alex's hands flew over the control interface, pulling up more data. "Every time we successfully hunted a Guardian, we learned, not just about hunting, but about protection too. The very act of overcoming them taught us their defensive strategies." The chamber filled with a new hologram, a timeline of human development. But this one was different from any they'd seen before. It showed not just tool use and social organization, but something more subtle. The gradual development of an almost instinctive understanding of defensive positioning, of protective formations. That's why the council was so fascinated. Alex said, her voice barely a whisper. "We weren't just surviving their Guardians. We were learning from them, absorbing their knowledge through the very act of hunting them." Dr. Wells' station began pulsing with urgent data. "Alex, the radiation resistance we've been looking for in the Guardian genetics, I don't think it's just in their DNA. It's in the interaction between hunter and hunted. Each encounter changed both species." The countdown timer blinked ominously. 24 days remaining. Alex stared at the display, watching their ancestors move with that uncanny precision. "We need to understanding how that learning process worked. Because maybe that's the key, not just what the Guardians were protecting us from, but how they taught us to protect ourselves," Jake said, already moving to help Dr. Wells with her analysis. In the hologram, the ancient hunt played on, each movement a lesson in survival that had been passed down through generations. Now they just had to remember what their ancestors had learned, before it was too late. 23 days until impact, and the Crystal Archives revealed their most startling data yet. Dr. Alexandra Morgan watched as the chamber transformed into a vast alien council room, the holographic recreation so perfect she could almost feel the tension of that ancient debate. "Statistical anomaly," the first council member's voice echoed through the chamber. Translated in real time, The humans are hunting our guardians at an exponential rate. Protection protocol has failed. Direct intervention is required. Alex glanced at Jake and Dr. Wells, who had both stopped their work to watch. This was the moment everything changed. The council meeting that decided Earth's fate. Intervention is premature. Another voice countered, its tone carrying what seemed like excitement. Look at the data streams. Every other protected species accepts the Guardian's presence. Only humans actively challenge them. This is unprecedented. A hologram shifted, showing multiple worlds where similar Guardian programs had been implemented. On each planet, the protected species developed within carefully controlled parameters. But Earth's projections were wild, unpredictable, spiking in directions the Council had never anticipated. Dr. Morgan, Dr. Wells called out, her voice tight with urgency. The radiation patterns I've been analyzing. They matched these Council projections. Whatever they were seeing in us then is exactly what's coming for us now. Alex finished, her mind racing. They were testing us. The Guardians weren't just protection. They were a challenge. The Council debate continued, growing more heated. The Guardians are being systematically eliminated, a third voice argued. Their primary directive prevents them from adapting offensive capabilities. The humans have found the flaw in our design. Not a flaw, the second voice countered. An opportunity. Each successful hunt forces both Guardian and human to evolve. The Guardians develop more sophisticated defense mechanisms, while we learn to think like them, Jake said softly, understanding dawning in his eyes. Every hunt was a lesson in their defense systems. The hologram shifted again, showing early human settlements, but now they could see what their ancestors couldn't. The subtle ways human construction mimicked the Guardians' defensive patterns, how their movement through territories unconsciously replicated the ancient protection protocols. Council members, a new voice cut through the debate, carrying an authority that silenced the others. We face an unprecedented situation. The humans have not only survived our test, they have turned it to their advantage. The question before you is clear. Do we intervene to save our guardians, or do we allow this species to inherit their legacy through victory? Alex's translation software began flagging terms in the debate. Genetic transfer, adaptive inheritance, survival evolution. Each phrase pointed to something larger, something their ancestors had unknowingly achieved. The coming wave, she said, moving through the data streams with growing excitement. The Council knew it would return. The Guardians weren't just protecting us from it. They were teaching us how to protect ourselves. Dr. Wells' station began pulsing with new data. Alex, the protein structures we've been studying, they're not just in the Guardian samples. They're in human DNA too, but they're dormant, waiting for something. The Council hologram reached its critical moment. The vote is cast. The authoritative voice declared, the Guardian project will enter final phase, but not as a withdrawal, as a transition. Let the humans prove themselves worthy of their inheritance. 22 days remained on the countdown. Alex stared at the genetic data, understanding finally dawning. They didn't just leave, she whispered. They left something behind. In us, in our very DNA. But how do we access it? Jake asked, watching the timer's relentless countdown. We need to think like they did, Alex said, already moving to the central interface, like both Guardian and Hunter. Because somewhere in this archive is the key to awakening what our ancestors earned. We just have to prove we're worthy of it. 21 days until impact, and the crystal archives began revealing the most carefully orchestrated extinction in Earth's history. Dr. Alexandra Morgan watched in awe as the holograms showed the implementation of Project Twilight, the Guardian withdrawal protocol. It's like a symphony, Dr. Wells breathed, watching the complex patterns of movement. Look how they coordinated each species' disappearance. The timing, the geography. Everything was calculated. The chamber displayed multiple time streams simultaneously. In each one, Guardian species began their carefully choreographed retreat. Mammoths moved north, following artificially generated climate patterns. Giant sloths migrated to increasingly remote areas, each movement designed to look natural while following a precise plan. They even engineered the climate changes, Jake said, studying the atmospheric data. Small adjustments to temperature, rainfall patterns, just enough to make the extinctions look inevitable. Alex moved through the data streams, her heart racing as she spotted something new. Wait, look at this pattern. During the final encounters with humans, the Guardians were deliberately exposing themselves to hunters. Dr. Wells rushed to her station, pulling up genetic analysis. These final phase Guardians, their genetic structure was different, modified. They were carrying something new in their system. The chamber's light pulsed with increasing intensity as it revealed the Council's final protocol. Alex's translation software worked overtime, decoding the complex instructions given to each Guardian species. It was a gift, she whispered, reading the data. The Council members who believed in use, they modified the Guardians one last time, changed their flesh, their blood. To what end? Jake asked, moving closer to study the display. Insurance, Dr. Wells cut in, her voice tight with excitement. The final hunts, they weren't just kills. They were transfers. The Guardians' modified tissues contained dormant genetic packages designed to integrate with human DNA over generations. The holograms shifted to show early human settlements during the withdrawal period. Their hunting patterns had changed, become more ritualistic. As if on some deep, instinctive level, they understood the importance of these final encounters. Look at the protein markers, Alex said, highlighting a sequence. They're almost identical to what we found in the modern human genome, but these are active, while ours are dormant. Jake's eyes widened. The radiation wave, that's what they were preparing us for. All this time, we thought they abandoned us, when really, they were making sure we could survive without them. Dr. Wells finished. But why make it so complex? Why not just give us the protection directly? The answer came from a final council recording. Direct gifting creates dependency, but what is earned through challenge becomes intrinsic. The humans must not simply receive our protection. They must learn to embody it. 20 days remained on the countdown. Alex stared at the genetic sequences, understanding blooming. Every hunt, every challenge, every victory, it wasn't just about survival. We were learning their protection protocols through action, through triumph. And now we need to remember, Dr. Wells said, already beginning new analysis. Before the wave hits, the chamber's light dimmed slightly, as if conserving energy for what was to come. In the holograms, the last of the Guardians disappeared into history, their final gift hidden in the blood and bone of the hunters who'd proven themselves worthy. Start running comparison analysis, Alex commanded, her voice firm with purpose. Between the active Guardian sequences and our dormant ones, somewhere in there is the key to awakening what they left us. As her team sprang into action, she watched the ancient scenes one last time. The Guardians hadn't just protected humanity. They'd ensured that when the time came, humanity could protect itself. Now, they just had to remember how. 19 days until impact, and the first human colony went dark. New Mars Station, population 12,000, stopped broadcasting mid-message. Their final transmission showed radiation levels far beyond what any shielding could handle. Dr. Alexandra Morgan stood in the crystal chamber, watching the waves approach through the archive's predictive models. Each projection showed the same thing, a wall of energy that would strip away every protection humans had built. We've lost contact with the outer Gulf stations, Jake reported, his voice hoarse from exhaustion. The evacuation ships can't outrun it. Whatever this thing is, it's moving faster than we calculated. Dr. Wells' team had been working nonstop, analyzing the genetic sequences they discovered. The Guardian DNA we found. It's like a key without a lock. We can see the protection mechanisms, but we can't figure out how to activate them in modern humans. Alex moved through the holographic displays, watching their ancestors hunt the great beasts. Something was missing, some critical element they hadn't grasped. "Show me the final phase hunts again," she commanded. The chamber filled with images of the last Guardian encounters. She watched as early humans tracked, cornered, and finally triumphed over their engineered protectors. But this time, she noticed something new. "Look at their movement patterns," she said, highlighting the hunters' formations. "They're not just hunting, they're mimicking. Every strategy they use is a mirror of the Guardian's own protection protocols." Jake stepped closer to the display. "You think the physical act of hunting was part of the activation process?" "Not just part of it." Dr. Wells cut in, her eyes wide with understanding. "It was the whole point. The Council didn't just want us to have their protection. They wanted us to understand it, to embody it through action." The chamber's lights pulsed urgently as new data streamed in. 3 more colonies had gone silent. The wave was accelerating, defying all known physics. "Pull up the modern human genome," Alex commanded. "Focus on the dormant sequences we found." The display shifted, showing the complex dance of double helixes and protein chains. "There," she said, pointing to a recurring pattern. "That's not just dormant DNA. It's waiting for a trigger, a specific sequence of neural firing patterns that match." "The hunting formations," Jake finished, already moving to his station. "The same patterns our ancestors used when they took down the Guardians." Dr. Wells' hands flew over her controls. "The protection isn't just genetic, it's neuromuscular. The gift the Guardians left us isn't just in our blood, it's in our motion, our coordination, the way we move together." Alex felt her heart race as the pieces finally clicked into place. "We don't need to inject something or build new shields. We need to remember how to move like they did, like our ancestors did when they hunted them." The chamber's holographic display updated with new casualty reports. The wave had reached the inner colonies now. 18 days left until it would hit Earth itself. "Can we teach people these patterns in time?" Jake asked, the weight of billions of lives heavy in his voice. Alex stared at the ancient hunting formations, then at the modern neural patterns that could unlock humanity's hidden defense systems. "We don't have to teach them," she said slowly. "It's already there, in every human being. Passed down through generations of DNA, waiting to be triggered." "But how do we activate it?" Dr. Wells asked, running new simulations. Alex turned to the central interface, her mind racing with possibilities. "We need to broadcast the right signal, something that will trigger these ancient memory patterns in every human at once, and we need to do it now." The crystal archives hummed with energy, as if responding to their understanding. They had found the key. Now they just had to turn it before time ran out. 17 days until impact, and Dr. Alexandra Morgan hadn't slept in 36 hours. The crystal chamber had become a maze of holographic displays, each one showing a different aspect of their desperate plan. "The neural pattern analysis is complete," Dr. Wells announced, her voice carrying a mix of exhaustion and excitement. "We've mapped the exact sequences our ancestors used during the final Guardian hunts. The synchronization is incredible. It's almost like a dance." Alex watched as the holograms displayed the ancient hunting formations. Dozens of humans moving in perfect harmony, their actions mirroring the very defensive patterns the Guardians had used to protect them. "Look at this," Jake called out, highlighting a section of data. Every time a Guardian was successfully hunted, there was a spike in specific protein production in the hunters. The same proteins we found dormant in modern human DNA. The chamber's lights pulsed in response to their discovery, casting ethereal patterns across the walls. Alex moved to the central interface, her mind racing. It wasn't just about killing them. The hunt was a form of communication, a way to teach our bodies how to generate these protective compounds. Dr. Wells' station began streaming new data. The final Guardian modifications. They were designed to release these compounds in a way that would bind with human DNA, but only if the hunt was performed correctly, with the right patterns of movement and coordination. A test, Alex breathed, understanding dawning. Every successful hunt proved we were ready for the next layer of protection. The Guardians weren't just giving us their gifts, they were teaching us how to use them. The holographic display shifted to show modern human brain scans alongside ancient hunting patterns. The similarities were undeniable. Neural pathways that had lain dormant for millennia, waiting for the right signal to reactivate. "We don't need to reinvent their protection," Jake said, moving to join Alex at the central display. "We just need to remember it. It's already inside us, written in our blood and bones." Another colony went dark, the wave of radiation continuing its relentless advance. 16 days remained until it would reach Earth, but now they had a plan. "Start the broadcast preparations," Alex commanded, her voice steady despite her exhaustion. "We need to synchronize the signal with the exact frequency of those ancient neural patterns." Dr. Wells was already moving, her team working to convert the ancient hunting formations into a digital signal. The crystal archives have enough power to broadcast worldwide, but will people's bodies remember how to respond? "They have to," Alex said, watching the waves approach on the main display. "These patterns are part of our heritage, passed down through countless generations. Every human being carries the memory of those final hunts in their DNA." The chamber's energy levels began to rise as they prepared the broadcast. Jake's monitors showed population centers around the world, each one a potential receiver for their desperate signal. "The protein synthesis models are ready," Dr. Wells reported. "Once the dormant genes activate, the protection should begin generating almost immediately. But the energy requirements will be massive," Alex finished. "Every human body becoming a living shield, just like the Guardians were. But this time, we're choosing it. We're accepting their final gift on our own terms." The crystal archives hummed with building power, their ancient technology preparing to awaken something that had slept in human DNA for thousands of years. Alex stared at the countdown timer, then at the wave of destruction approaching their world. "Begin the activation sequence," she ordered, her voice carrying the weight of both past and future. "It's time to remember what our ancestors learned. Time to become what the Guardians always knew we could be." The chamber's light reached a blinding intensity as the broadcast began. Across the globe, billions of human bodies were about to remember a dance they'd never known they knew. A dance of survival taught by the very creatures they'd once hunted to extinction. 15 days until impact, and the world held its breath. The Crystal Archives broadcast had begun, sending ancient neural patterns rippling through the global population. Dr. Alexandra Morgan watched the monitors, her heart pounding as the first reports began flooding in. "Singapore reports unusual neural activity," Jake called out, his voice tense. "Mass synchronization of brain patterns across the population. It's spreading through Asia." Dr. Wells' station lit up with incoming data. Protein synthesis beginning in affected areas. The dormant genes are activating, just like we predicted. But the scale of it. Alex watched as the global map lit up with points of activation. Like a wave of its own, the ancient memory was sweeping across continents, awakening something that had slept in human DNA for millennia. "Look at the pattern," she breathed, watching the spread. "It's following the same routes our ancestors used to hunt the Guardians. The same pathways, the same progression." The chamber's holographic display showed both past and present simultaneously. Ancient hunting parties moving in perfect formation, while modern humans unconsciously began to mirror those same movements. Multiple reports of strange behavior, Jake reported. People are moving in synchronization, without conscious control, like they're remembering a dance they never learned. Dr. Wells' monitors showed the biochemical changes sweeping through the population. The protection protocols are activating. Every human body is becoming what the Guardians were, a living shield against the wave. 14 days until impact, but now they had a chance. The crystal archives pulsed with energy as they continued their broadcast, awakening more of humanity with each passing second. New Mars Station, Alex said suddenly, looking at the deep space feeds. Show me their last images again. The display shifted, showing the final moments before the colony went dark. But this time, they saw something new. In their final seconds, the colonists had begun to move in formation, their bodies responding to some ancient memory even before the broadcast began. They were already starting to remember, she whispered. The threat itself was triggering the dormant protocols. We just needed to amplify it. The chamber's light shifted to a deep gold as new data streamed in. The wave had reached the inner solar system, but now it was meeting resistance. Humanity's awakened defense systems were beginning to work. Energy readings are off the scale, Jake reported. Every human being is generating the same protective field the Guardians used. But together, we're stronger than they ever were, Dr. Wells finished, her voice filled with wonder. Because we're not just using their protection. We've made it our own. The main display showed the wave's approach slowing, its deadly energy being absorbed and dispersed by billions of human bodies acting in concert, each person a living guardian, their combined power far exceeding what their ancient protectors had been capable of. The Council was right, Alex said, watching as humanity rose to meet its greatest challenge. We didn't need eternal guardians. We needed to become our own protectors. The Crystal Archives began a new recording, documenting this moment for future generations. On the display, the wave of radiation met the wave of human protection, and broke against it like water on stone. All colonial stations reporting in, Jake announced, joy breaking through his professional tone. The wave is dissipating. We're going to make it. Dr. Wells' team had already begun analyzing the changes. The activation is permanent, she reported. These defense systems are fully integrated now. We're not just surviving this. We're evolving through it. Alex stood in the chamber that had revealed their past and saved their future, watching as humanity proved itself worthy of its inheritance. The Guardians hadn't abandoned them. They'd simply stepped aside, trusting that when the time came, their greatest creation would rise to take their place. And humanity had done more than simply rise. They had become something new, not just protected, but protectors. Not just survivors, but guardians of their own destiny.